Welcome to the podcast that puts a finger on the pulse of medicine and technology. On this show, you'll hear from investors, industry executives, and healthcare providers on the science and business of medicine. I'm your host, Omar Khateeb, and this is the State of MedTech. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. My name is Omar Khateeb, your host and head of state for the State of MedTech. I had a little bit of a tongue twister there because it is a Sunday. But you know what? Regardless of what day it is, we try our best to accommodate you and bring the best quality information and education for you. Today, we have a great episode specifically for those physicians, clinicians, and surgeons out there who are looking to start a company, or maybe you've already started a company and you're trying to figure out how do you raise venture capital money? How do you do it in a way that maps to milestones that you can keep a valuation high, especially given the environment that we're in now? I know the White House says that we're not in a recession by definition on Friday, but many people would argue against that. And so that's why it's been tough when it comes to valuation. So let me start the show as I always start the show, and ask you to do one thing. Drop in the chat what city you are joining from. We have people joining from all over the world. So go ahead and drop it in the chat. I want to see what city you're joining from. We'll be bringing on our special guest in a moment. We're going to be covering 3 keys to raising venture capital money in medtech as a physician. And of course, this is going to be a CME eligible event via your reflection. That's courtesy of our partners over at CMify. So if you're watching this live or on recording, just check the comments in the chat. There's a little link there. So once you finish the webinar, go over, enter your reflection, and you can get a free CME credit. That's right. The State of MedTech has decided to unlock all CMEs. That way you don't even pay. What a great way to start the day, right? All right. So that being said, let me bring on my special guest, Jeff Smith, joining us from Lafayette, California. Hi, Jeff. How's it going?
Doing great, Omar. Thanks for having me. Excited
Absolutely.
To be on the State of MedTech.
Absolutely. Well, very happy to have you on and happy to have you here on a Sunday. But this is a day that works out for most physicians. But while we wait for people to roll in, and I see people jumping in, which is great. And of course, everybody, we always appreciate the emojis. That's how this show gets high reach. So I want to see like a flood of rainbow emojis. So just keep hitting the heck out of that emoji button. But Jeff, for a little context, if you could give us a little introduction, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you very much, Omar. So my name is Jeff Smith. I'm a healthcare entrepreneur. For the last 15 years, that's been as a co-founder and CEO. I have founded 8 companies, 2 exits, and currently I'm the CEO of a venture-backed business called Providence Medical Technology, where I co-founded the business with a San Francisco-based neurosurgeon named Bruce McCormick. And the company will do over 30 million in sales this year, growing 25%. And what I love about the Providence journey for me is I've celebrated 14 years leading this business and trying to build this team. And what happens is you actually, like every single part of the company building, you continue to build until it's a large enterprise. And so as a founder and as a leader, you just keep learning because the next set of challenges presents itself. But all that being said, I've founded companies in like import exports, international distributors, software companies. I've done consumer apps. My first business was an e-commerce platform in 2000 that failed. I've developed spinal implants, licensed them. So I'm not the expert. I do have experience that I'm always willing to share because that's how I learned almost everything. That didn't start with a mistake. So my why, when Omar and I were talking about this, I get really excited inspiring people's growth so that together we can all transform healthcare. And so my experience as a founder and an entrepreneur, I have had co-founders that were my peers in college. I've had co-founders that were just business associates. But for the most productive and rewarding years of my career, it's been physician entrepreneurs. And so my passion and really everything that I'm trying to communicate and share to certainly Omar's audience is that physician entrepreneurs, I believe, are uniquely qualified to solve the biggest problems in healthcare. The medical training system is just proof that you can learn anything. You can reduce any, whether it's financial statements, engineering, prints, and CAD. A physician that was able to get through the medical training can learn anything. So I would just remind physicians that. I hear a lot of people talk about, I don't have a business degree, or I'm not a business person. And I'd love to talk to you about that because I don't see it exactly the same way. But anyway, backdrop is I'm an entrepreneur. I love what I do. I love healthcare. I get super inspired talking to physician entrepreneurs. And so the purpose today, if you follow my podcast, Unmet Need, it's really the whole arc of the physician entrepreneur's journey. So you can find it anywhere podcasts are served, and it's Unmet Need with Jeff Smith. But today we're just going to talk about financing. And so I'll turn it back over to you, Omar.
Fantastic. Yes, and it is a great podcast. I really like it because it's essentially I think it's a good use of your time. You usually record via your phone on your way home, but I've personally learned a lot from the podcast. So I just put it in the banner below. So if you guys look up Jeff Smith Unmet Need, either just Google it or go to Apple or Spotify, you'll find it right away. And I have to always tell people, if you listen to the podcast, you like what Jeff's talking about, do him a favor, subscribe, share it with somebody, and most importantly, leave a review. It takes you 1 second to put 5 stars and write a short review. That's how Jeff's podcast can reach even more physician founders and help them out. And of course, we got some people who chimed in. We got Lindsay Thomas coming from Utah. Hey, Lindsay, thanks for joining us. All right, so, see, I knew since it was a Sunday, people were going to be like slightly fashionably late. Now I see the comments blowing up. We have Dr. Kasif Mazar, Raleigh, North Carolina, ear, nose, and throat surgeon who finds most pleasure in being a physician entrepreneur. Dr. Mazar, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Hey, if you're liking the broadcast, hit the hell out of that emoji button. Jeff and I are going to be doing a lot of entertaining here and education. So just hit that emoji button, invite others. And for those who are just starting to join now, I see the live numbers going up. We will have live Q&A. So drop a comment, drop a question in the chat. So Jeff, let's start off with the 3 keys. And I'm just going to kind of give a quick intro to those 3 keys. But these 3 keys, why did you pick these 3 keys specifically?
Yeah, the 3 keys being, you have to create a legal entity just so should you be able to raise capital from outside investors, you want to make sure that your investors, that you're following all federal, state, and local laws. But what you really want to do is create a corporate entity that is well suited to receive outside investment. And so as a Delaware C corporation, which is what is always recommended to me, so I pass that on. Delaware as a state it has well-established precedent on how court cases related to corporate entities. There's a lot of case law, and so it's a predictable, simple place to do business. It's low cost. It's also worth noting, if you are a physician entrepreneur and you're based in California, a California C corporation, and let me preface this by saying I'm not an attorney, and please do not construe any of this as legal advice.
Neither am I. We're just 2 guys on the internet sharing some advice that we recommend nobody should follow. But this is what we would do, right?
That's right. But there's actually, this is something kind of important. Delaware corporate law is kind of the framework that pretty much all corporations in the United States use. California has a slightly separate basically within California corporate bylaws, for a transaction to be approved, so that would be a financing, that could be a sale of the business, that could be acquiring another business, you need a majority of common stockholders, which is unique, and we can come back to it later. But in general, the 3 points are: get yourself set up legally so that you can responsibly take in your friends and family's money and give them a stock certificate in physical or virtual form. Number 2, and this is the fun part, this is the part where I get the most enthusiasm, plan the business for 3 years. And don't write a business plan, type it up, and do all the tabbing and formatting. The business plan is really what are the milestones that your new company are going to achieve. And in a classic med tech, founder, new company, it usually starts around one of the first things that the entrepreneur has that's of value is a patent. So I cover this in an episode on unmet need, but you have a great idea because you have a prepared mind. You're in the field, you're helping the patients, you're seeing the inefficiencies and opportunities, and you're seeing patients that sometimes are just not satisfied, and you're giving them the best care that you're aware is available. So the physician entrepreneur has great ideas, and so filing a provisional patent, which I like to think of as a rough draft, is very low cost. Even if you have a law firm prepare the provisional for you, if you do it yourself, you still get a priority date, and you have 12 months to convert your provisional rough draft. No one can see it, so it will not be art that other potential patent filers might be able to see. It will not be published. And then you have 12 months to kind of iterate, build upon that idea. But in that first 12 months, for a couple $1,000s, when you pitch those first investors and you tell them just how passionate you are about this problem you see in the world in healthcare, they already know you because these are your colleagues, classmates, friends and family, people that you know from your education and training that have been successful to the point where they can make relatively high risk investments. So anyway, the point of all that is you need to be able to responsibly and legally take in the money and do the right thing by your investors. The laws, corporate bylaws are well established. So you start your entity. Next, you have to come up with a 3-year plan. And so I got a little stuck there on the patent, but the point is, do they have IP filed? If it's a physical device, is there a working prototype? Mm-hmm. Because now you've taken the invention and your idea, you've actually realized it in the world. And if you can do some type of demonstration, depending especially on the level of complexity, now your corporation, you have intellectual property.
Quick question for you too, Jeff. When it comes to the patent, because a lot of physicians, especially ones who have let's say an idea, many of them get their education online or even watching Shark Tank, and so that's something that's often seen, which is getting a patent. But there is, I guess, maybe a little nuance to it, between, let's say, a physical device, let's say a medical device or an implantable or something, and let's say SaaS. Would you say it's still as important to get a patent if it's a SaaS product?
No.
Got it.
No, and I think that, I certainly have more experience in med tech than SaaS, but my experience with SaaS is, and a good example is not that it's a SaaS business. I suppose you could argue it is, but Tesla open sourced their IP. Mm-hmm. In the truly highly innovative, fast innovation curve cycles, it moves so fast. The patent I filed in 2010, it's largely irrelevant. And so what you're looking for with a software as a service business is, can you get a really high advocacy, enthusiastic, very, very small niche of customers that will help you define the value that your hypothesis of value or the pain that you're trying to take from your target customer. But what it allows you to do is get this really enthusiastic group of users that you're going to learn from and build the product. But in SaaS, it's product velocity. Mm-hmm. Because you can push an update all the time. In med tech, it takes too long, so you don't have the same. There's different advantages and disadvantages on the competitive side in med tech because it's harder to get a new product to market. Mm-hmm. You just don't have 100 companies all of a sudden launching something comparable. Right. But as it relates to IP, Omar, I want to make this point because in my job, I've got to meet so many physician entrepreneurs, so many surgeons in general. all across the country, different backgrounds, training, walks of life. And it's always informing my perspective and giving new insights. But the one pattern I've seen that I'd love to see not happen anymore is busy physician tend to be closer to retirement than just starting, which is what I've noticed. They're cranking through a busy clinic. They're doing OR. They're on call. They've been doing this for 30 years. They have an idea. They've seen industry. They have a friend, someone they did a fellowship with that supposedly made a lot of money on something. Anyway, they decide that they're going for it, which is awesome. But they get with a patent attorney. As professionals, a physician talks to an attorney, a CPA, it's sort of like everyone stays in their lane. And so what can happen is the $2,500 provisional patent, which is 2 hours of legal fees. And they're really just like editing and just basically just taking what you would disclose in normal speech and putting it into claim format. But $2,500 is all you need. What I see, and it's really bums me out, is a patent attorney has gotten with a physician entrepreneur that earns a very good living, cranks out a lot of volume. And so I've seen millions of dollars invested in a patent portfolio that it breaks my heart because I just the value's not there.
Exactly. And and actually before I have a comment to make, Dr. Noel Peng has a interesting comment and question. I'll bring that up. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Jeff, because a lot of times, especially with surgeons, what I see is, they spend all this money in the patent. So now it becomes like this sunk loss fallacy in their head. And rather than doing the thing that's going to raise valuation, which is commercializing or driving adoption or something, then they spend all this time shopping around this patent to see who's going to buy it. And I even told a surgeon a few months ago this. I'm like, look, yeah, it's great you have a patent. Nobody's going to pay you millions of dollars. It's like those days it's very, 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 very rare. And most of the times when those things happen, it's because the patent's being used somehow, not just sitting on the shelf and someone's like, oh, this is valuable. But let me bring this comment from Dr. Noel Peng. Not sure if you'll be able to speak to this, but Dr. Noel Peng says, what do you think about the USPTO PTAB killing patents? I have no idea what that is. I know the USPTO, the patent office, but I don't know what PTAB is. Jeff, any thoughts?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know what PTAB is, but this could be what Dr. Peng is referencing.
Patent Trial and Appeal Board. That's
okay. All right. So again, I think I'm relatively sure I know what this is, but just if I'm wrong, my apologies. But what I'm going to share is useful anyway. So there's a thing that I learned about, and it was through a transaction. We were selling a technology to another company, and there's two concepts in IP that are very, very, very important. One is it safe for us to go out and sell? And by safe, I mean we are not infringing on others. All right, so that freedom to operate is incredibly important because what it doesn't say is that you can protect people from coming into your space. Big distinction. It says you going out into the marketplace are not going to infringe on other IP. And so that's important. Now, a freedom to operate position is like a research project because what you're doing is you're asking an attorney to effectively read all the prior art and conduct a comprehensive search. That's very prospective. Point is, you don't need to do that in the early days, but what you want to be able to do is say that I have patent ability. So will I have freedom to operate? Meaning some other companies are not going to sue me for infringement. So I damage their business. That's one. The second is, am I going to be able to protect some of the secret sauce of my invention? Mm-hmm. And so early on, I did this several times. Just it was naivety or ignorance. I would represent our patent portfolio probably in a way that, it wasn't disingenuine, but it was ignorance. When you have 3 or 4 patents filed, That's great. One patent filed, that's great. You've now begun this prosecution that takes a very long time. And all of the strategy that I would recommend you get counsel from a patent attorney that specializes in healthcare. There's so much that can be done, but you have to get the applications in. So we talked about IP a lot. I'm not an IP attorney, so I just want to say David Shaw has been on 2 episodes of Unmet Need. I do think he would be considered maybe the top 1 to 3 MedTech patent attorneys. I mean, you could write a book about him. He won the Robot Wars 3 times, won the Kyphon Medtronic Wars. He's an impressive person, but he really touches on these topics. And I'm not just trying to plug the episode, but it's just better than what I could share. But I want to take it back to the 3 points. So you have a Delaware C Corp. Now the cost of filing that, if you go to the Delaware Chamber of Commerce or Franchise Tax Board, they've automated this. It's sort of like you can do your taxes on irs.gov. It's not a very difficult thing to do. However, I highly recommend paying the money. It might be a $5,000 retainer, which I know is real money, and so I'm not being dismissive of that. But what they're going to do is the law firm is going to say, okay, you're a physician entrepreneur, you're starting a medical device or a digital health. They're going to know the kind of business and solution that you're building, and they're going to ask you questions about how you could possibly finance it. It's usually going to end up with the same thing, but that's important. The second is, and this is where I should be spending most of the time because this is really the most important part. Once you're set up to take in money, now you need to know what you need money for. Mm-hmm. So if you just take a very basic vanilla medtech, you're going to have a patent milestone. Actually, I want to think of a different metaphor. Imagine we're sitting across the table from each other, and there's 10 blocks, it's big cubes, wooden cubes, and it's like Pac-Man. These are the risk cubes. In the beginning, when you go to your college buddy and ask your college buddy to invest 50 grand, there's 10 cubes of risk. You've de-risked nothing, but they're just betting on you. And that is a great bet. And I highly encourage you to think about betting more on yourself. And when you talk to your friends and family, colleagues, associates, when you bring them into your idea, that you've given them something. And you don't have to have blind confidence because how could somebody be confident in something this hard that you've maybe never done before? But you can have complete clarity that this problem must be solved and you're going to solve it. But back to the blocks.
Yeah. And
when you
Jeff,
file that first,
real quick, just because Dr. Pang was asking for it. So Dr. Pang was asking for the contact for David Shaw. So for those who are watching, I'm going to drop his contact in there, but I'm going to drop the episode that Jeff interviews him. So I recommend here's the contact, but then also the episode that Jeff does. You can just look up Unmet Need David Shaw and you'll see the episode, but I recommend listening to that episode. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, thank you very much. And just there's 2 episodes because it was a long conversation. The first one is if you're very interested in David, very born in the UK. Anyway, that's more kind of biographical. It's the second one that gets into very tactical things. So everybody's busy. But the point is, it's a really important image to think of risk as blocks, or they're the part obstacle.
Of key. We're on key 2 about the 3-year plan. Okay.
Yeah, this is the 3-year plan because what typically would happen when you go to a VC, let's say, and you have an idea, maybe a patent, they're like, this is a little early for us. We typically like to see the business a little further along. What they're saying, which makes total sense, is you need to de-risk this further. Mm-hmm. So the same thing happens when you're trying to license your patent or if you're trying to sell your business. So the risk in medtech is this a real problem? Or are we just making things up? Or there really isn't an unmet need. But That's risk number one. That's where physician entrepreneurs have so much credibility, and it's a real advantage. Then the second risk is this going to be protectable? Like, can anybody come into this space? What are the barriers to entry? If we try to fund this nascent business, how are we going to know that some bigger company is not going to come in and eat our lunch? So what they're looking for there, and this is what, if I reflect on all the things that I've done that worked, totally failed, biggest outcomes, unexpected surprises, you name it. The probably the number one thing that I wish I did differently is focus on is the underlying technology that I'm building on. Is this thing going places? And I, I had a conversation, with a number of people recently, but like video streaming is happening. So there's any number of free, low-cost services so that Omar can do this. LinkedIn is pumping a lot of capital and continuing to grow its reach. So that is not exactly building on an underlying technology, but it's an example of you get to ride a wave that you didn't have to get all the momentum to crank it up. And so when you look at just the low cost of starting a business now, those are just sort of macro trends, and it's software, continuing to add value at lower cost. But this moment in time, if you think of the exponential underlying technologies, what are they? And, most people would say it has something to do with machine learning and neural networks. Mm-hmm. That's a thing. And so if you're building your solution with that, there are investors, many, that are thematically investing in that space. If you have a digital therapeutic, for instance, and you're playing the mobile angle, kind of already happened, but there continues to be billions of phones made every year. So the point being is, a company like Uber was not possible until everybody had the phone. That was a fundamental mobile bet. They bet on mobile happening. Facebook almost lost social because mobile happened and they weren't expecting the rate of migration. And they went all in to win mobile again. And it was, it's a great story. But the point is, when the underlying technologies such as cloud storage approaching free, cryptocurrency and blockchain technologies are going to be transformative in healthcare. I genuinely believe that. There's billions and billions of dollars of capital allocated to fund Web3 and crypto. But the point is I don't identify as a device guy or a drug guy or a SaaS guy. It is the underlying technology of blockchain. The rate of adoption is stunning. The speculative nature of our coins going to go up or down, that's not even what I'm talking about. The underlying general ledger type of crypto services that are enabled by cryptocurrency, that's a thing. Building a solution on that matters. Cloud storage, optical recognition, neural networks. But notice I didn't say titanium. I've been building a company with a great team and an amazing co-founder for 14 years, and the fundamental tech, and I'm not, we're creating a new standard of care for high-risk patients. It takes time. But fundamentally, we've kind of shrunken surgery by an order of magnitude, which is important. Make your solution at least 10 times better than the competition. Not always easy in healthcare, but it's a good mark. But what we've done is, it's image-guided surgery, could be digital surgery, but fundamentally we have small plastic, sterile package, single-use instruments that we make highly precise. But that's the underlying technology. And so the rate of adoption, the way a new competitor might emerge, it's not going to happen like that. Whereas if you look at robotics and digital surgery, how could a company like Intuitive come out of nowhere? How could the Makoplasty, total knee replacement, that just came and it went fast. And what happened, and there's a pattern that is really important to see, is strategics, meaning the large cap, Medtronic, Abbott, Zimmer, and big companies, Pfizer, you can go all throughout the ecosystem. They have capital to invest.
Mm-hmm.
And so their investment horizon, we're talking about a 3-year plan. They have to invest on a 10-year plan, a minimum, because some of their drugs and devices take a decade to commercialize. So they have to invest their capital, and that's like the surplus, it's their profits, it's their free cash flow. Their investors don't want them sitting, in a CD or just in a bank, in a savings account. So they have to get a return on that capital. One of the best ways to get a return on capital when you're behind a tech curve, which you can almost count on in healthcare, in medtech certainly. It's not because the rest of us aren't working really hard. It's just regulate. So you see similar patterns in fintech. But the point being is when the wave is coming, and you're riding the robot wave in the 2010 to 2020. If you're doing anything in the robot space, people are looking. Whereas if you're making a new printer that's really, really small and the color is so crisp, nobody cares. So the 3-year plan is we have an idea, we can protect it. Now we're going to validate that this is a real problem. And this is where you can really research and understand your market. But then eventually, since this is going to take it to a commercial stage, it's going to be whatever performance testing is required to validate the safety and efficacy of the treatment. There'll be the developmental quality system and eventually a regulatory submission. Okay, so I'll stop there. If you can do that in 3 years, you're hauling, and that's excellent.
Yeah.
But the point is, and I'm going to wrap it up and then I'll turn it back over to you, Omar. That financing is basically to get to regulatory submission or to get to an animal model. You're going to need to know for your solution what will be a pivotal moment where you can say this thing works. It works a little better than we thought. And that's when you go to venture. And so the name of the game is, one, what you have in your idea is incredibly valuable. For investors that are accredited and have allocated a part of their personal assets to invest in speculative startups, which there are many, your deal that you bring to them, they need that deal, your deal flow. So they want to see your idea. When you communicate how important this idea is in transforming healthcare, they're going to see the passion. And what you're ultimately asking and you're going to articulate is, this is the plan to get from, it doesn't have to be A to Z. I'm going to get to A to K. That's the 3-year plan. Now, the last point is, what do you need for year one? Because you don't need 3 years. So maybe that's going to take $5 million. Seems like a pretty big number. Well, the expenses stack a little bit later as you start adding costs in various ways. So that first year, maybe you only need $200,000.
Right.
That's the convertible note where you're basically you're postponing any discussion on valuation because frankly it's impossible. And you're saying when professional investors come in, an institutional investor like a venture capitalist, you're going to get that valuation plus a discount. And so you're going to get the best price. And so I just, when it comes to raising money, if your budget and your model, and definitely get some help building a financial model in Excel. It's not complicated, but the model design will only be as useful as really what assumptions that you've considered to connect in the model. So, but assuming you have a model that says you're going to need $200,000 or $150,000, raise another $100,000, and now you've got $400,000 as your raise. If you can, say you're in for 100, because maybe you're going to do that 33,000 a year over 3 years, but you're committed. If you can invest a decent chunk of it, that definitely is a great signal. It's like when your buddy calls and says, hey, I want you to invest in my company. How much have you put in? Nothing yet. I was kind of hoping we'd use your money. People do want to see a relative investment and skin in the game, in addition to the substantial risk of your time and opportunity cost of other ventures. So now it's also important to note that it depends on it's contextual. No one investors don't want to see that you put half of your liquid net worth into this business. That comes off as a little reckless. But if you've got $10 in savings and your investor has $1,000 in savings, something just to show that you're taking a comparable risk. I do think that's important. But the takeaway is you're not raising a seed. You're not raising a Series A, which is about 3 to 5 million. That doesn't mean anything to the investor, because what they're trying to do in that first meeting is say, is this a person that can get hard things done and has a track record of overcoming odds? Because that's the startup game. Has this person showed remarkable stick-to-itiveness, discipline, a dogged approach to executing in what they've done in life? That's where the physician entrepreneur has a unique advantage. Such a grueling training and career. And then they're saying, do they have any idea what they're doing? And they're not expecting the answer to be yes, but they want to know, are you coachable and are you at least open?
Yeah.
And then finally, they're making a bet that you can do those 2 or 3 things that you said you could do in the amount of time you said you could do it with the amount of money you said you needed. Exactly. And when you do that, that's the milestone for the next round. And I would just say in general, you want to get 18 months of runway at least. So
that makes sense. Quick comments from the audience. So we got a lot of comments. So I want to bring a few up. So Dr. Mazar had some good comments. I'm going to kind of read them off in order to you. So comment was, very good point made by Jeff on keeping the eye on the wave that is coming and being ahead of the wave. But the challenge is there's no crystal ball to identify the wave. And then finally he says, totally love the way Jeff is breaking up the costing expensive plan. Yeah, and here's something I'll make a comment on. While I think physicians founders are great because, when you leave, and I can speak to this because I went through medical school, that when you leave medical school, your superpower is that you can learn and teach yourself anything. And physicians have the capability to stick to things and really grind it out. The double-edged sword that's there, and I specifically, again, I'm really painting with a broad brush here. This is my personal anecdotal experience, is that especially when I see it with surgeons, a lot of times surgeons, because of the level of confidence you need to execute and do surgery, that ends up unfortunately translating to other areas where a surgeon has way too much confidence about things, and in reality, they don't know what they don't know. And so my recommendations to any physician is that if you start embarking on this process, before you even go, talk to an attorney, talk to anybody. LinkedIn is a great channel where you can reach out to somebody like Jeff, right? And of course he gets pitched quite a lot, but that's one avenue. Talk to another physician founder. There are physicians who are running incubators. Talk to somebody just to get some ideas and thoughts. And again, there's this balancing act as an entrepreneur where you have to have an insane level of confidence to do this because it's crazy. There's a lot of risk. So you need that confidence. That needs to also be balanced out with this healthy level of paranoia of, I may not know what I'm doing. I need to go and check this and talk to somebody. And I think if you do that, then you will be able to map that out. And to Jeff's other point, when you go in front of a VC, I mean, look, just if you watch Shark Tank even, it sounds silly, but there's a certain number of questions they're always going to ask. How many people are using this? Do you have adopters? What are those people saying about it, right? do you have a patent? If yes, how long is it good for? If no, why not, right? And again, my bias here is that you can have the patent, you can have all this. If you don't have a commercial plan, or at least a plan of how is this going to get adopted and what problem does this solve, you're not going to get money. A couple other comments I want to bring up. And Jeff, I wonder what your thoughts are. So Dr. Mazar, we have Dr. Peck who also joined. And the comment thread is blown up right now, so I appreciate all the. See, I knew Sunday's a good day for physicians, so I'm going to be like slightly covered. So Dr. Mazar says, I'm going to take a contrarian view on the freedom to operate. So for those who are watching, freedom to operate means your patent attorney says you can operate without infringing on a patent. He says, in my opinion, they're not worth it, especially in the early stages of your startup. One reason is because freedom to operate does not and cannot evaluate the continuation patent and related families. So as an early stage startup, you will end up spending $30,000 to $40,000 and still not get a clear answer. I tend to agree with that. I mean, Jeff, what are your thoughts on this?
I completely agree.
Yeah, because again, I think it's like, go talk to a patent attorney, but before that, talk to another clinical, like a physician entrepreneur or a medtech entrepreneur, just to get their thoughts, get an idea, but then spend that money on getting adopters, going and running trials. Like, there's going to be other things that a VC is going to want to say, well, did you do this? It's okay, you didn't. So there's, to Jeff's point, at this phase, getting money is not just about having a great idea. It's about removing risk. Would you agree with that, Jeff?
No, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I think the point on freedom to operate, a lot of times people think of an FTO position. It's often, I think historically, it's associated with a transaction or a financing. Mm-hmm. And so it's possible an investor would say, we just have to do some FTO work. Now, if a VC spends $40,000 on a freedom to operate search, when if and when the financing comes in, it'll actually be reimbursed out of the money that was invested. But the point is that independent FTO position is not something that you want to do often. And it's actually a very sensitive topic, because freedom to operate, having an independent position could uncover IP that you didn't even know about. Maybe it uncovered IP you wish you didn't know about. And I think going back to the comment on patents being destroyed, what I was going to say earlier is there's this concept of invalidating a patent. So when you file that provisional rough draft, you put all kinds of things that reflect your thinking in the moment. And then over the next 12 months that you have to convert to a non-provisional, you improve it and you add it. And eventually, when you submit a non-provisional application for this prosecution with USPTO, then you end up negotiating. But ultimately, when people say, I have that patented, what we get as entrepreneurs and patent inventors is we get claims. So it's inevitably, there's this like really beautiful photo on the front that has like, a winged Peloton delivering drugs. It's like, it's this amazing thing. What is actually issued and granted it's so narrow in what it says, and it doesn't have a lot of coverage, and it happens 3 years later. Right. So what I think of freedom to operate is when you bring something to market, or you're in a clinical trial and it's clear that you have something of significant value, that's when people are going to want to own a piece of your business, and they're going to want to do an assessment, because so much of their value is assuming some ability to protect. What I would offer is every category of medtech, there always is 5 or 6 eventual competitors.
Yeah, that's true.
Pick the class.
Yeah.
Pick the drug. And so what you're ultimately trying to do when it comes to IP is make sure that you can defend what you have as a value, because doing an FTO position so early on when you could do a prototype, because whether if you're working with bits or bytes, investors want to see something. Mm-hmm. They want to see that you were able to take this awesome idea and put it into motion. And because what you see as someone that hears investor pitches, again, it's this whole pattern thing. Entrepreneur shows up, they've somehow got this group of advisors and people helping them with no money. They've got a really impressive cast of advisors. They have a mixed cast of advisors, but they did it.
Right.
They have a prototype. It's really slick or it's really kludgy. Point is they're doing things and they're not just talking about it. And so that is, is very important to have a strong bias to action and understand that the whole, when you're building a money burning business, time matters so much.
Right. I have a good question from Dr. Mazar, and Dr. Michael Peck has a comment I'm going to bring up. So for Dr. Michael Peck, he said, we've raised half of our $1.5 million seed from board members and the rest from physicians who understand the need. Personally, I think that's always great when you raise money from clinicians, because then you have people who understand the problem, and they can, if not adopt the product, they can at least proliferate the adoption of it. And then Dr. Mazar asked a great question. I really like this question, especially given the economical times that we're in. Dr. Mazar asked, question for Jeff, is it better to overraise or underraise? I have my own thoughts on this, but Jeff, I'm wondering what your thoughts are. Should you overraise or underraise?
If there's more there, take it.
I agree. Better to ask and get money when you don't need it than when you need it, right?
Yeah, it's weird how when first of all, to Dr. Peck, congratulations. That's great to have raised that much, and also to have your it's nice when your board of directors is invested because they're representing the shareholders. One point that came to mind, and I want to be really clear: the VC, the independent board member, the employees, the founders, all an important role. I tend to think and advocate for the founder. So my only comment is, and this goes back to step one of did we just adopt normal Delaware bylaws for C Corp that are well suited for a medtech business that's going to need to raise? Please make sure that the board seats and how investors get to retain their board seat. Oftentimes, usually a venture capital firm that does early stage medtech, part of the reason their investors, their limited partners, put money with them is because they think they can help the business grow. They think they can advise, and the good ones do. So, the main point here is that the three, and I am not assuming that this is the case, Dr. Peck, I want to be clear, but let's say three investors all put in $100,000, right? And that's an amazing vote of confidence. That's a lot of capital risk on something risky. Does that mean they're going to be on the board of directors forever?
That's a good point. Because you don't have so many seats, right?
No. Well, so the bylaws will dictate how the board of directors is determined. There are things where the founders have to approve any new board of director appointments. And so, again, everyone plays an important role. What a VC would tell you is their job is to raise a big pool of capital, make 10 or 15 bets. They're not concentrating a decade of their life on one bet. And if 3 of those bets hit, 2, sometimes 1 returns the whole fund. So they have a diversified portfolio, whereas as founders, we are all in. We're generating, we're putting our money into the business. We're giving it all of our energy and time. We're also, if you end up working at the company full time, which often happens, you're driving your income from the business. So it's not the same. So founders, I tend to think you want founders involved. I don't tend to think, I believe wholeheartedly, founder businesses where the founders continue to play an important role, perform better. because they're the inspiration. Now, anyway, that's the end of that point, but I just would just make sure you read the articles of incorporation, the corporate bylaws. A lot of times, if you file for a financing, I think it will be an amended and restated articles, and they change usually because the new investors have certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, as a watch out, it would be good to make sure that as a founder, Dr. Peck, you and your other founders, board members, have a way to change the board dynamics to match the stage of the company.
Exactly. And something I'll mention, because Peck was also chiming in saying, finding Series A money is rough. Something that people are not aware of, and actually if you look up life science intelligence on YouTube, you'll see from 2022 the talks on this. But what was it, 8 years ago, David Wield, who served under Obama, came up with a Jobs Act for equity crowdfunding. What people don't realize was that was specifically for healthcare. But healthcare really didn't take advantage of it. There was a time where equity crowdfunding was kind of, not well respected. It's like, oh, you couldn't raise real VC money. Those things have changed. So now through different investor acquisition vehicles, equity crowdfunding is a thing. I mean, Monogram Orthopedics out of Dallas, Texas raised a $23 million Series A through equity crowdfunding, where, med device professionals, physicians, clinicians, people who have, $5,000, $10,000 believe in what the company's doing, throw it in there. I think that's a valid route as well. And a couple other points, and then I want to get to the third key for Jeff to talk on. Dr. Pang was asking about, Noel Pang, that is, was asking about incubators. Yeah, there's different incubators in different states. I left one that I personally know very well, which is Theranova out of San Francisco, founded by a physician, Dr. Daniel Burnett. And going to a incubator, you have to treat it just like, similar to like when you're going to go to college, right? If you're going to go to a top school, right? So for example, if you're going to study, let's say you want to go study business, Cal Poly is a great school, very hard school to get into. May not be the best place for you to go study business. You might be better off going to, Penn, right, or Harvard. So you have to ask yourself, what do I need to get out of this incubator? What companies have gone through there in the past, and what am I going to learn from them, right, and get out of it, like network, strategies, so on and so forth. So Stage 2 Capital, run by Mark Roberge and it's like the first sales and marketing venture firm. I'm a big fan of them, but they're mainly focused on SaaS companies. So if you're a medtech company, I think their models and their incubators amazing. Maybe they're not the right fit for you guys. So I would always evaluate that. And then the last point somebody had posted earlier, and I think Jeff will agree with me with this, is that just because you can take the money doesn't mean you should. You should ask yourself, this person who's going to give me money, what else are they going to provide? Do they have operating experience so they can advise me? Have they had great exits? If it's just money, like in my personal opinion, Jeff, if you disagree, let me know. I don't think I score VCs hard on this, which is it's not enough just to write a check. Like you have to bring more to the table than just writing a founder a check. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree that you always would like your investors to add value in some unique way. So now, if you're going back to this, we had to raise $300,000 for year one. If they're accredited and you don't believe that they're going to call every day and be intrusive, and so it's going to somehow inhibit your ability to execute on the schedule, a great investor this early is someone that writes the check. They don't think much more about it.
Yep.
Because they really care about you. They want to see healthcare get better. They are in a position where they have an abundance of cash. And that investor, they're getting, they feel good about the investment they've made, almost like it were a grant to research and science. And I'm saying this as it's like one person, but it's a persona that I do see. They're just at a stage of their life where they want to help people that are making the world better. That's a great investor. A difficult investor is somebody that is, they basically want to be an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
So they're going to
It's
tell
a
you the whole
terrible
time.
investor. Yeah, I never thought. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think in general that the last thing I would say on investors is, and it kind of ties into the incubator. Y Combinator, the San Francisco Paul Graham founded, it was and is the incubator where just by getting accepted into it, they take 7% of the business. They don't put in that much capital, but the effect that it's just like getting into Harvard or
Yeah,
something.
your valuation goes up like 3 or 5. Like I could hear about a company. I'm like, it sounds interesting. And they're like, well, it came out of Y Combinator. I'm like, oh, let me hear more. You
Yeah,
know.
like in med tech, there's a handful of firms that do it, but I find that I actually missed a deal that I was super excited about. A friend of mine threw me a bone. I was slow, but these guys had a roster of investors, not big checks, but these were people that I'd heard of that had said yes. So that's the way a good round comes together. If you can find somebody that you respect an awful lot, and you can approach that person with all the confidence and conviction you have for your solution, but you respect them such that you can bring your humility to the table as well. And, we don't all start with a lot of humility, but we'll all get it eventually in this business. So
Absolutely.
if you can get somebody that people admire to bet on you, $50,000, then suddenly, and then you ask, you want to get permission. It's like, hey, can I let others know that you're participating? Now you start to get momentum because, and they usually know what's happening. You're borrowing that individual's credibility and reputation and respect, and which is why it's important to ask. But all of a sudden, you get someone like Fred Moll writes a check,
Oh yeah.
and people
A
are like,
lot of money's going to come after that.
what does Fred know? I want it. And that fear of missing out. The worst thing you want in a round is just this long dragging out. It's not going anywhere. You're following up. So there needs to be a sense of urgency to it, which is why I always found it was nice to do these maps on like a whiteboard or just a piece of paper where you start drawing the connections and you basically defined your universe of target investors at the beginning, and then you can work through it quickly. Because even if you don't raise it, you could say, just want to let you know, we finished our financing and it's over. But people need to know that I don't say they need to know, it's important to communicate so that you can drive towards urgency, that this financing is an opportunity, maybe a good one, maybe not a good one, but this opportunity does not last forever.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's hard because, when you're not getting momentum on the raise, you want to believe that the person that keeps rescheduling the call is really interested. Often is not. So you just need the numbers.
Exactly. And I think that's a good segue. So just kind of cover like the third key you have, which is essentially mapping the financing timeline to those value milestones. And again, if there's one thing that a recurring theme that I hear from your advice is that you have to sit down and think these things through and just map it out, and not just, oh, hey, we got a patent and it's a really good idea. Like you really have to think about, like, if you raise, let's say somebody gets really excited, says, oh, you just need $100,000, I'll give you $1 million. So you got to have a very clear idea of what you're doing. And again, it's kind of like, it's just like working in your career. It's like you have to think about small wins that you're going to have to make your manager happy beyond just like this massive win at the end of the year, right? You have to show like, okay, like, and I think Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, mapping those value milestones are important, because if you pick the right ones that sort of accumulate, that's going to keep the investor from calling you every week saying, hey, well, what's going on, right? So if you can maybe kind of expand on that, on what does it mean to map your financing timeline to your value milestones?
Yeah, well, at the highest level, if you could just imagine let's say these are the milestones: idea, invention, patent, companies incorporated. Not really a milestone, but it happened. You have a proof of concept prototype. You have a functional prototype. It's like technical risk. You're demonstrating you can make this product and it works. Then there's maybe some kind of preclinical or clinical data assessment, regulatory submission, regulatory approval. So that is before you've sold a single implant, you haven't helped one patient yet. The point is those milestones, investors know where they like to come in. So there's been, in the last 10 years, but definitely in the last 5 years, I've joked with some of my friends that are VCs. I'm like, is this the venture business or the sure thing business? Because it doesn't even seem like venture when a lot of the capital in VC as an asset class went to something called growth equity. And it's, companies doing 25 million in sales, they're on the market, they have data, that there's not a whole lot of risk. And people will put in big slugs of capital at that point because of those 10 cubes, design works, have the patents, they're issued, did a clinical trial, good data, FDA approval or clearance, early commercial validation, customers like it, retain the usage. There's no risk. You've got to, at that point, you're usually 10 years in. So growth equity is one of those things where it's available, but usually if you get there, don't really need it because you've built a decent sized business. It's the venture. It's the looking the entrepreneur in the eyes, hearing her talk about the regulatory strategy and saying, okay, I'll buy it. Like that's what the early stage medtech investor is doing. They're looking at they're listening to the physician say, oh, we think these CPT codes and DRGs this is going to be the coding paradigm. Okay, I'm going to assess that. That's where I'm going to get smart and do some work to make sure, because the entire business could be based on a coding belief that is just not correct. And there's been many companies that have failed for that reason. One of them, I founded. We developed this great carpal tunnel product. Anyway, it's a long story, but there's just the facility reimbursement for carpal tunnel release is not enough to build a business on. So even if you had 100% of what the hospital got, this is terrible planning. Terrible planning. But I bring it up because the milestones, so if you just said everything up to seed, friends and family, first 250 grand, it's your CV, it's your lifelong relationships and people knowing what you're all about, your character and integrity, it's your passion, and it's your vision. So the plan, it's not about getting too into the weeds of when you submit and what exact tests you're going to do, but it's this problem. If there's anything I know, is this is a big problem. We have a solution. It's right now it's just an animation, but I have no doubt we can make this thing. And we have a patent. There are people that will bet on you. It's hard though. That's the hardest money to raise.
Why is it the hardest money to raise, by the way?
Because it's like if you take out a mortgage on a house, the first thing they do is what's this house worth? And they're like, all right, it's worth $1 million. We'll lend you $800,000. Because there's underlying value. They're never going to lose their money because the asset and I know I'm talking about debt, but there's nothing there. And in the beginning, there is nothing there. Now, this has changed quite a bit, and it's definitely for people developing digital solutions and certainly, no code software or, most SaaS businesses technically are not very complicated. They're spreadsheets that are online in a really nice user interface.
It's a good way to put it, yeah.
Right? And it's super useful. But this now also applies with 3D printing, different ways of doing clinical trials. Make something before you go to investors. Like if you could save $5,000, $10,000, $25,000 just of your savings, this is whatever you're able to contribute, put that into concrete things like a prototype and a patent, because you spent the money, you got something. I'll never forget we had this prototype when we were raising for Providence's first round. Nathan Meyer made it, and it was genius. Our device never looked anything like it, but when you would pitch, different investors, and you just take your solution, pop it in this case, it was the cervical spine, it brought the whole thing to life. I see entrepreneurs spend a lot of money before they make anything. So anyway, in conclusion, you got to get yourself set up as a legal entity. Getting that wrong will be so annoying down the road, and it's so easy to get it right. And it starts off your relationship with a healthcare focused, full service legal team that can meet all your needs, IP, general, you name it, litigation in the future, if should that ever happen. You kick that off. Next, you got to get your plan, your 3-year plan, where it doesn't have to be all the blocks off every year, but you're going to keep taking the risk blocks off the table. This is a real problem. This thing actually works. We got through the FDA. We partnered with the FDA. We didn't get through with them. We partnered with our regulators, and that's that. And then and you've actually demonstrated that in 3 years you can de-risk this business and prove that your vision is real. Now, the step 3 part is once you bucket those. So if you take that 3-year plan and you think about taking the 10 blocks of risk off the table, usually the grouping of that will map to what stage investor is. And so my suggestion to physician entrepreneurs especially, but to any entrepreneurs, when you read about a great exit, like One Medical, I think last week, Google bought them for $3.9 billion.
Yep.
So if you assume the employee stock option pool represented between 8 to 10% of the company, that's not including founders. Hundreds of millions of dollars was put into the pockets of people that just did really well in healthcare. They're part of a success. Great people to pitch. That's because they're also gonna, they're pretty close to what it looks like when it works, versus maybe someone that's just left their 4th startup or the VC that has been investing in biotech and it's getting beat up or something. It's good to go to people that just had a win, and you see this, and then the last thing I would say is what's so powerful about a physician network is highly paid professionals, uniquely qualified to assess the potential value of your solution. Not all going to agree, and that's not fun. They're really well suited, and most of your colleagues can make an angel investment in the $50,000 range if they're compelled to do so. So it's a huge advantage, and I would just say, just as a very simple rule of thumb, is for the first $1 million, I wouldn't pitch VCs.
I agree.
And they usually will tell you if you ask them, which I never did. I would just come in, be nervous, do my pitch, and they're like, "Yeah, we have a minimum $10 million check size." It's like, so it's good that you're raising 1.3 million, but we can't do that.
Right. And even if they can, they're going to take a huge chunk of your company at a lower valuation, which you don't want. Dr. Michael J. Peck has a really interesting question. And before I bring up his question, just something I wanted to point out, and I'm glad you brought up One Medical. So I'll be writing, I'm almost done with an article on why that happened and what I think it means. And it'll be a podcast. But the one thing you have to, guys,
Cool.
everyone should know about One Medical, long story short, they were losing a lot of money. They acquired another company who was doing Medicare Advantage, which just in the grand scheme of things, essentially One Medical's business started making more money from a small percentage of people because of the company they acquired. I mentioned this because along with building a product, as a founder and entrepreneur, you have to think about there's 2 things you're selling: a product to the market and an investment product to investors. So you have to think, what is it they want to see there? Because again, it's not enough just to be like, well, the market really likes this, right? You have to think what that investment product is. And Dr. Michael J. Peck, and again, if you are joining, we still have a lot of people watching live. We appreciate it. drop your questions because we covered all three keys. We're gonna take some questions just sort of wrap up the show. But Dr. Michael J. Peck says, what are your thoughts on being ready for due diligence and due to the Theranos debacle, FINRA approved? Personally, Jeff, I don't know about you, but for some reason, even though Theranos was a medical device, because of the hype it got, I don't think people for some reason think of it as a medical device company. I haven't seen any issues because of the Theranos debacle. It happened so long ago, and it was such a one-off thing. But I mean, maybe just a broader question like, what are your tips on preparing for due diligence?
I think due diligence it's great to always have a data room. Now, it's a funny term, call it a data room, because Google, G Suite has every service is free storage, more or less. So in general, having a good organizational system for your business is good due diligence. So have all your IP correspondence in one place. Maybe summarize your issued patents.
And only give access to things that they ask for, right? It's like dealing with the police. Don't answer questions that you are not asked. And with the data room, don't give access to things that they have not been asked. Like, a lot of people put the data room together. They're so excited. Like, here's the whole thing. I'm like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, and I think so. I totally agree, Omar. NDAs. Don't ask investors to sign NDAs. I mean, they don't do it. If it's a competitor, if there's some unique circumstances, but traditionally just investors are not going to send an NDA for every pitch.
Right.
You don't want to have that much, you don't really have that much confidential, sensitive information in the early days. So if you file a patent on what makes your solutions, so great, I used to have such intense paranoia that people were knocking us off, and then you realize that my job is to make anybody care about this company ever. Like, you have to keep talking it into existence. No one's copying it initially, unless you're doing something that's like a fashionable thing, like a fast or slow follower to like the fifth on the market. But I think as far as Theranos goes, this is an example going back to this Delaware bylaws. That was a failure of governance. And the directors, which were incredibly prominent. I mean, I won't give commentary on it. There's been enough, but directors have a fiduciary responsibility to know what's going on. Now, if management is committing outright fraud, allegedly, then it's hard to say that it's the board member's fault. But that's why, the way we avoid Theranos debacles. Radical transparency. You have board meetings quarterly at least. You take detailed minutes, get them approved, and you just follow Delaware corporate bylaws. And so I think you can do okay there.
Absolutely. And Lindsay Thompson has an interesting question. I'm my own, I guess, bias on this, and I'm wondering what Jeff, you think. So Lindsay's question is, how do you suggest protecting SaaS if not via provisional patent? Do you just be the quickest and the best? So I had something come up this week with a SaaS founder. So this has been kind of like on my mind. So I kind of want to share my thoughts. And Jeff, I'm wondering what you're saying. Here's my thing is, I think in the SaaS world, and this specifically like in MedTech SaaS, everybody's so paranoid about showing what their thing does. And again, sorry, everybody, it's going to piss people off when I say this, but I agree with Jeff, which is a lot of SaaS is essentially just Excel spreadsheets online. Like, that's what a lot of SaaS is just making things look nicer. It's very rare that you have something that's really, really different and patentable. And so if you want to impress investors, my recommendation is not just focusing on growth of revenue, because while that up into the right graph is nice, the next question they ask, which is, well, what's your churn? And if your churn sucks and your customer success sucks, that's not good. So making a product that's so good that customers buy it, they love it, they don't churn, you have high utilization. Those are the things that help you win. And part of that is you have to kind of, be brave about it and say, we're going to show more of the product than our competitors do. Because everybody's like hiding behind a demo. Like, oh, if you want to see more about the product, ask for a demo. But guess what? Most adopters don't want to talk to a salesperson to learn more. Like, you have to make it easy for them to learn everything. Jeff, I mean, your thoughts, because you came from the SaaS world, so I'm wondering if you agree with that.
No, definitely. I mean, when we started Greenlight Medical, the problem is it was a Providence medical technology. We were hiring reps and we were getting stuck in clinical value analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And clinical value analysis was an emerging specialty amongst hospital administrators. And the inspiration was every new product request form, it was always a collection of attachments. You try to get signatures, and it was just very difficult. And Greenlight and what Austin Dirks, the CEO, and the team built there, it just made that pain a lot less. It gave the company visibility. So the point is, we launched the product, and then you hear 3 companies got venture financing. I mean, all of a sudden, competitors came out that did similar things, always a slightly different value proposition. And the way you would win is again, this is like product velocity, communicating with your, most avid fans of the product. It's not the person that uses it once every 6 weeks. It's the power user. Why do you love this? What is the problem? And then you get really, really good at your core product. I am not, I think probably one of the best SaaS investors is David Sachs at Craft Ventures. Ran a bunch of SaaS companies. Now he has like several $1 billion of assets under management. But when you pitch a SaaS investor, and I strongly recommend going to Craft Ventures, David Sachs and his team, they actually put out the metrics. And like, if you're going to meet with us, we're going to ask you these numbers because we understand the characteristics and patterns of high growth SaaS businesses. And a lot of it comes down to the unit economics of how much it costs to bring on a customer, how much value you get from a customer over a lifetime. But the point being, when you do a SaaS product, I and others could disagree. One, I would not file a patent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you connect it with something else, maybe with a device, like you have a bracelet, that has some kind of SaaS, like maybe there's a tie-in. You can't go wrong filing a provisional. I just think if you go to a SaaS investor and you're talking about your provisional patent, it might be, they just would think that you don't understand SaaS.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. And I have to give thanks to, for those who want to look something up, Mark Roberge, who's the first chief revenue officer of HubSpot. I talked to him a few years ago, and by coincidence, I was talking to him about one of his books, and by coincidence, he's like, oh, I have this other thing called The Science of Scaling, and he showed me this framework. You can go to Stage 2 Capital and download it. But the big thing that he taught me was like, growing your revenue really aggressively is not the important thing, because you can be growing, but if you're losing customers and your product sucks, that's going to catch up, because there's only so many customers for your product, right? And even me, I'm a small business entrepreneur at the moment. Even me with my own products, I put more money and effort into making sure my current customers are happy, because those are the number one people to go back to and sell them more stuff. And if your original stuff sucks, they're not going to buy it, and they're going to talk about it. I was going to say, like, word of mouth can be can scale in your favor, or it can go against you, because people do talk.
Yeah, one thing that I think can cause some investors to become uneasy is, and it's kind of a polarity, the incredibly hyper, highly charismatic, boundless energy entrepreneur that is you're immediately drawn to. They want to do 7 things, and we got this product, and this is going over there, and focus is so important on a startup because making 4 or 5 products that may or may not have a need in the world, that doesn't really build a lot of value, and it likely doesn't solve the problem you're so passionate about. But when you focus on one solution, that's how you can iterate over and over and over again and be the absolute best at that thing. And you just want to make sure that that's a big market, and you think you can make it 10 times better than what the standard is.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, Jeff, let me see. We still have a lot of comments and everything, but we've been on for an hour and a half, and it's a Sunday. I want to be very respectful of your time. But before we go, I am gonna quickly just show my screen because I want people to see your podcast. So for those who are interested, make sure that you check out Unmet Need with Jeff Smith. And again, these are some great episodes. I've been listening to a lot of them, so there's social selling, but then if you go down, there's a lot of great, this is kind of like a mini incubator for MedTech entrepreneurs. So I recommend go through, listen to all these episodes, So there's financing, there's principles of growth marketing, there's all these great episodes. You'll learn a lot. And again, you've had some great guests on here. You have Matt Steer on. You mentioned David Shaw earlier. So I highly recommend to people go and check out this podcast. Leave a review, of course.
Thank you.
And and of course we'll be sending everyone who's a clinician who watched this, whether you watched on demand or live. We'll be sending you a email with the CME link to get your free CME credit. If you're curious, if you're watching this on demand, scroll up to the top of the comments. You'll find it there. If you can't find it, just shoot me a message. But before we go, Jeff, any parting words? Let me get rid of that banner. Parting words, last words from you to the physician entrepreneurs who are watching this live right now and on demand.
First of all, parting words, Omar, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love what you're doing. Congratulations on all your success. And thanks for teaching me this. For the physician entrepreneurs, congratulations. You're showing up on a Sunday to watch this live stream. So it shows a level of commitment. My only word of advice is have a bias to action and try to connect yourself and spend most of your time that you think and talk about your new business with high quality people that know how to do what you're doing. And if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn or go to my website, jeffsmith.co, you can schedule a time. I am always happy to make introductions. I like to, my why is I want to inspire growth so we can transform healthcare together. And the highest leverage way I believe I can, help with that is just helping entrepreneurs. So if I can be of any help, please let me know. And then, and thanks so much, Omar, for the plug. But please listen to Unmet Need and stay tuned for the next episode.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Jeff, stay on. We'll chat right now. Thank you all. This has been another episode of the State of MedTech. Again, if you're a physician listening to this, make sure to go, courtesy of our partners at CMFI, grab your free CME credit. Again, we've made a decision here to make all these CMEs free. We used to charge, I think, $10. We're now making them all free for you. So make sure to go get that. And if you love the show, hey, do me a favor. Go subscribe on YouTube. Check us out on Spotify or Apple. Share it with somebody that you feel would benefit. And of course, always write a review. We do benefit a lot from those reviews. So until next time, everybody have a great Sunday, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.